Welcome to the Book Flood Podcast. I am your host, Tom Nixon. My guest this week is author Patricia Newman. She is the author of the new Beatrice and the Nightingale, a recipient of a Sibert Honor Award, and an environmentalist. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you for having me, Tom. It's great to be back on your podcast.
Oh, glad to have you here for sure. Definitely want to get into Beatrice, your new book.
Okay.
Remind folks a little bit of your career trajectory, though. How did you get to here?
It was a long and torturous path, Tom. Wow. I was not one of those writers who loved writing as a kid. I wrote for school and my school reports, and I was a good student. I was sort of a nerd, actually. But I wasn't one of those kids who kept a journal. Boy, I really tried. I can't tell you how many journals and diaries I started, only to have 90% of the pages blank. I had the best of intentions, but I didn't follow through.
Right.
But I think one thing in particular sort of fueled my sense of justice, if you will. I was bullied in fifth grade as a kid. And, I didn't have much of a voice, fifth grade and some of sixth grade. And I feel it still, even now, when things are unfair.
Right.
So I started reading these stories about the planet, and there are definitely a lot of unfair things going on with respect to endangered species or our ocean or rivers or just our air and generally our climate. So I started writing these environmental stories. I didn't start there when I was writing. I wrote other things, but I read an article in the newspaper one day and I started Plastic Ahoy. And once that was published, I felt like I had found my home. I knew where I was supposed to be. So I guess something good came out of that bullying, right?
Right. Absolutely. So let's talk about Beatrice and the Nightingale. This is your new book. How long has it been out?
It came out in February 2026. So it's still a brand new baby for me.
Right. So tell us about it.
It's a picture book for younger students, 6 to 9, say. So maybe kindergarten through first, second grade. It's published by Margaret Quinlan Books at Peachtree. It's the story of a famous cellist in England. Her name was Beatrice Harrison. She was born in 1892, and so she lived kind of during the turn of the century. I found out about her because during the pandemic, I was locked in my house like most of us were, binging on movies, and I happened to turn on a Netflix movie called The Dig with Ralph Fiennes and Carey Mulligan. It's about an archaeological site in the UK called Sutton Hoo that was excavated. It's an Anglo-Saxon, I think it's an Anglo-Saxon burial ground. But anyway, I'm watching this movie, and one of the characters is a young archaeologist played by Lily James, and she's talking to a character who's an RAF pilot. And he mentions nightingales to her, the song of the nightingale, which is supposed to be one of the most beautiful in the bird kingdom. And she says to this RAF pilot, "I've never heard a nightingale sing, only over the wireless." And when he expresses confusion, she starts to explain to him that she heard a nightingale because Beatrice Harrison, the cellist, was playing with nightingales in her backyard, and they were singing along with her. And she convinced the BBC to come to her yard, lay down their microphones and amplifiers, and broadcast the duet to millions of people. And this was 1924, so radio was brand new. It was a brand new thing. Not everybody had a radio. So it was an amazing accomplishment. Not only had many people had never heard nightingales sing because nightingales weren't endemic to their area, but this was the first time bird song had ever been broadcast over the airwaves. So it was sort of a story of firsts. And for me, it combined nature and music and technology. So it was sort of like the perfect storm for me.
Why is it so important for you and in general to teach about the environment to kids?
I want to show kids how they're connected to the environment. We are nature. We are water, we are trees, we are plants, we are the animals. But a lot of kids don't necessarily know that. They depend on us and we depend on them. And just two very simple examples. Think about the fish that's on your dinner plate at night. Where does it come from? Well, it comes from the sea. And if the sea isn't healthy, or it comes from a river, and if the sea and the river aren't healthy, then you don't have fish on your dinner plate. Think about the air that you breathe. Well, the air that we breathe comes from plants on land or plants in the ocean. And it's that photosynthesis, that making of the food that gives off oxygen for us to breathe that actually makes Earth habitable. It's nature, it's our environment that allows us to live on this planet because of all the functions it performs for us. So I'd like to give kids a sense of connection and a feeling of gratitude for nature by sharing these role models with them. People like Beatrice who had a passion for sharing her music and the song of the bird that was singing along with her sort of miraculously. He wasn't just making noise, he was singing in harmony with her. So she had this passion, and her passion led to this incredible sense of awareness for the Nightingale song and what was possible for radio during that time.
How do you find it being able to keep your passion for the environment going? I know that this is certainly a passion for you, but one looks around the world and wonders where we're headed, particularly with the environment.
Right, right. I usually counsel people to stop reading the news and read more children's books. Really, our media is sort of the algorithm for our media is bad news sells. And there actually have been studies about that. Bad news sells, and headlines with sort of good news in them aren't clicked as often as the bad news headlines are. So, I mean, part of it's our fault, right? Yeah. And the media doesn't include stories of all the good news that's happening. I mean, I told my husband just the other day, we were watching this dystopian show that had a chance of a nuclear reaction, a nuclear explosion, which would create a whole bunch of radiation and kill everything for hundreds of miles. And it reminded me of Chernobyl. Remember, we were alive during Chernobyl and when that
Right.
huge nuclear accident happened. And what most people don't know about Chernobyl now, yes, it was a huge nuclear accident, but it is now a wildlife refuge. Yes, the animals are radioactive, but they are colonizing that place and they are surviving. So it's sort of like, but we don't hear about that kind of stuff. We don't hear about somebody like Beatrice who brings awareness to people about the beauties of bird song. We don't hear about the woman in Peru, Kirsten Forsberg, and Giant Rays of Hope, who gathered her whole community together in coastal Peru and taught them how to love mantas and use giant manta rays as a flagship species to help each other protect the ocean and to increase awareness. We don't see all of the businesses and organizations and school students and everybody, churches, communities that are doing their localized projects because our media tends to focus on broad global issues. Is out of the Paris Climate Accord again. Those are the kinds of headlines we see.
Right.
But we don't see that, XYZ in Fresno is happening because of this one little nonprofit that's doing this project. So what I'm trying to do is shine a spotlight on the good news. There's a lot of it. There really is. A lot of people are working to save the environment. It's just that we don't know about them all.
Would you say there is hope for the environment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have this whole new initiative called Teach the Hope. And I think all we need to do is to share the good news with each other and share it with our kids and our students in classrooms and teach environmental literacy concepts through this lens of these people, these role models who are doing good things.
No, that's good to hear because you're right, of course, is most of what we hear on the news, 90% or more, is all very negative.
Yeah, it's bad news.
Yeah.
It's bad news.
What was your experience in writing this book? What was that like?
I had a great time writing this book. Usually I interview scientists and I travel for my interviews, but Beatrice passed away in the 1960s, so I did not get a chance to meet her. But I did read her journal, which was annotated by an author named Patricia Cleveland Peck, and she did a wonderful job. So I had the beauty of Beatrice's words and
Mm.
Patricia's sort of putting things in historical perspective. So, and I also had the opportunity to listen to several of Beatrice's recordings because a lot of her music is recorded on record. In
Oh,
fact, she would go into, I think there was a recording studio called like His Majesty's Voice or something like that. And she cut several records playing her cello. She performed all over the world. She performed for President Woodrow Wilson in the White House. So I had a really good time just becoming acquainted with a person from history who just loved nature like I do. She would play outside in her garden most nights. She would often bring out her own pet birds. The Harrison family had a huge number of pets, something like 20 something dogs and
wow.
canaries that would fly all over the house. She would bring the birds outside and play for them. They had a donkey. They had reptiles. They had all kinds of animals. So they were true nature lovers. But she loved playing outside in her garden and she marveled at the Nightingale's song obviously he didn't know the tunes that she was playing, but he could hear the music and he kind of harmonized and trilled along with her. And I, one reason that male nightingales sing is to attract a mate. So I bet he thought he'd hit the jackpot, right? Here he's got this musician who's helping him along to make this beautiful song that cannot possibly be matched by anyone else, any other nightingale.
Let's talk about writing as a career. Do you feel like you're established now as a writer and you can make it happen, or is it still a bit rough every day?
Well, paraphrasing, I think it was Willa Cather, she said, each book teaches me to write itself. So every time you have a new idea, you have to figure out a new approach. Where are you going to start? What is the story? I didn't want to write about Beatrice's entire life. Then it would have been a catalog of concerts and practice sessions and people she met and people she played for. I wanted to write about one little incident in her life, which was this broadcast from the BBC with the Nightingale. So I had to pare it down. And what are you writing? Are you writing a picture book? Are you writing something for middle grade students? Are you writing something for young adults? So you have to figure out kind of how much real estate are you working with. Picture books have a lot less real estate than young adult books, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost always writing nonfiction, so the things I'm writing about are true. So I have to research. And 9 times out of 10, if I'm writing a book about the ocean, there's a lot I already know about the ocean, and I might be able to use some of my research again from a previous book. But for a book like Beatrice, I wasn't able to use any of my previous research. So I had to start at the beginning. But I only write books. Now I know what captures my interest, so I'm not flailing like I did at the beginning. There's sort of this period about, okay, what do I write about next? But now I don't have that problem. I always know what I'm going to write about next. And I know a little bit better what will work in the market and what won't. I know much better how to promote things. I'm better at promotion than I was at the beginning of my career. So yes, you do gain some skills. I taught myself how to maintain my website. As a writer, you have to do things like that. These skills that you didn't know you need to have. I'm a much better presenter than when I started. So yes, there are skills that I have learned, but there are certain parts of certain books where I do have to start at the beginning.
It's funny, if you ask the person on the street about a writer's life, they would assume, well, you must be paying someone to do your website and you must be paying someone to promote your books. And That's just not the reality of the life for most writers.
No, it isn't. And I mean, even if you are paying somebody to do your website and you are paying somebody to promote your books, you have to get out there and do some work as well. I mean, people want to see you. They want to talk to you about your process and your struggles and the cool information that you found out. And if somebody's doing your website, for instance, you still have to provide the content. It doesn't just
Right.
magically appear. How do you want to say it and what exactly do you want to say?
Mm.
So there's still a lot you have to do, even if you're lucky enough to have a staff of people who are helping you.
I have seen now at a couple of the web hosting companies that they say, we can use AI to make your website for you.
Yes, I'm sure they can. And we're
Yeah,
going to
I
leave it
just
at
don't.
that, right?
And I'm not necessarily always opposed to AI, but at all. But the content still has to come from your head.
Right. And it has to be authentic, right? I mean,
Right.
if you wanted to talk to a machine, you'd just go ask AI about me. But if
Mm,
you want to hear me and hear my stories and hear some of the research bumps I had with Beatrice, and boy, I did have a big one that we should talk about in a little bit. But
okay.
you have to talk to me.
So tell us about the bump.
Tell us about the research bump. My editor Margaret and I were actually in the throes of editing Beatrice and the Nightingale. And she emails me and she goes, Patty, did you see the podcast with a bird expert who said that Beatrice's duet with the Nightingale was faked? And I know your eyes are opening wide, right? I
Right.
had not seen that. So I started doing some research. And sure enough, this bird expert was on a podcast in England. I had to actually contact one of my friends in England to download the podcast for me because it wasn't
Oh,
available in the US. So she downloaded the podcast, sent me the file, I listened to it, and man, he sounded so, you know, authentic and expert. And I thought, oh no. But he said a couple of things that made me question. He said something about, from this recording of Beatrice and the Nightingale, we can tell that the Nightingale was not real. It was a bird mimic and a person who mimicked bird sounds that the BBC had hired, stationed in Beatrice's garden just in case the bird didn't sing. And that was a little suspicious because in my research, I had never read anything about the BBC broadcast in 1924 being recorded. It was broadcast, yes, but not recorded.
because
So,
they weren't always recording then,
well, right. I mean, who thought about recording it then, right?
right?
So, and then thank goodness for Patricia Cleveland Peck again, the person who annotated Beatrice's diary. She actually knew Beatrice's sisters who survived Beatrice and had a relationship with them. And one of the sisters, Margaret, was in the garden with a boy. I mean, there were many people in the garden because so much equipment had to be laid and it was sort of a spectacle at the time. So there
Mm.
were a lot of people in the garden. And Margaret was there and she said, I never saw a bird mimic in the garden. I was there the whole time. And then Patricia Cleveland Peck wrote this wonderful article that said, Beatrice was an expert musician. She was a prodigy. She was accepted to the Royal College of Music at the age of 9. Her
Wow.
musician's ear was so well developed that do you really think she couldn't tell the difference between a real nightingale and a fake one?
Mm.
And do you really think that Sir John Reith, the director of the BBC, would put his entire reputation on the line by basically lying to the audience and saying that this was a real duet when in fact it was fake? But that kind of evidence and that kind of, sort of historical perspective, I'm inclined to agree with Patricia Cleveland Peck and say the duet happened. And the other
Right.
huge piece of evidence for that the fact that the duet happened was that they repeated it for the next 12 years. So if the bird didn't sing the first time round, why would they go back for 12 more years for more of the same punishment? So
Right? You'd assume that if it didn't work the first time, it's probably not going to work any of the
Right.
other
Okay,
times.
this is not gonna happen. And, of course, it only happens in the spring because that's when nightingales are mating. It's not a
Mm,
year-round phenomenon.
sure.
So it's the duet happened. All of this is in the back matter. I tell you all about it in much more
Mm,
detail than I related here, but it's all in the back matter, so you can share it with your children, your students. It's a great fun story. And it's a
nice.
wonderful example of how sometimes research takes a left turn and takes us places that we have no idea it's going to take us.
Is there a single book or award of which you are most proud?
Oh, wow.
This is always a
Children,
tough question.
it is a tough question because, children at school visits always ask me, what's my favorite fill in the blank? What's your
Mm,
favorite book? What's your favorite animal? What's your favorite kind of ice cream? What's your, keep going. So I have problems with the favorites because I like lots of different things. And every award that I've received is just so special because it's telling me that my work has connected with someone. And since I write
right.
about connection and I write about gratitude and I write about, these people in our world doing these wonderful things, it's like if I can connect to somebody with my words and the images that an illustrator or photographer bring to my work, I that just sets off a whole round of gratitude for me that I don't want to diminish by saying one award is my favorite.
What are you working on now?
Well, I have several ideas in the pipeline. Nothing has won a contract yet, but I think also we're sort of in a bit of a slowdown with respect to children's publishing.
Mm,
So I'm hoping that my editors are just kind of holding on to them and not saying no, but it's going to say yes when the time is right. But just as for instance, I've got another book about the ocean out there. I've got a book about beavers. I've got a book about cheetahs. I've got a book about hermit crabs. So who knows which one will hit first? But I'm hoping they'll all hit. But we'll see, one after the other, maybe.
is there a book or a series of books from your childhood that still resonates with you?
Well, when I was a kid, I read series books all the time. I don't have much patience for them now as an adult. Do you find that too? Do you read series as an adult?
I probably read, maybe I'll do a trilogy, but
Okay.
anything much more than that, and no, not as an adult.
Right, because there's so many other things you wanna read, and it's
Right.
hard to just stick with. But as a kid, I devoured those things, so missed anything that was a mystery. I think the one thing that stuck with me the most is Harriet the Spy because of her notebook where she wrote down everything. Remember Harriet the Spy by
Mhm.
Louise Fitzhugh? Because I use notebooks like Harriet's all the time. Every book, I start a new notebook. And my notebooks sometimes they come from the dollar store, but other times they come from the places that I have visited. So my travels, I always buy a new notebook every place I travel. Like I just went to Australia and New Zealand and I've got a new book idea going in this one. This is the notebook I
Mm.
picked up I think I was in Tasmania when I picked up that book.
Oh, neat.
So I like that notebook concept. So I think about Harriet the Spy a lot.
What are you reading now?
I picked up a book in the Auckland airport called The Poet Empress, which is a fantasy, but it's also it seems like it's clearly about ancient China, but it's a fantasy world of ancient China. And I picked it up as a kind of a fast read, but man, I'm enjoying it. It's really
Mm.
clipping right along. The other thing I'm reading right now, you can see on my markers here, is Hope Matters. This is by Ellen Kelsey, and I'm feeling a sense of hope for the environment in part because of her book. So I always
Nice.
have like a piece of fiction going and a piece of nonfiction going, and then there's always a stack of articles or books or magazine things that I have to read for research.
I do it a little bit differently. I always have a print book going and an audio book going because I walk every day. And so I'm
Interesting.
always listening to a book.
Okay.
I find, though, that they need to be very different books. We're actually going on a trip. My wife and I are going on a trip to Germany and Poland. And so I've been delving deep into that. The problem is the books overlap a little too much. And
Ah,
so I go, wait, what about this? Oh, no, that's the other book.
right. You're starting to conflate them.
Yeah.
Exactly. I walk too. I walk my dog, but I find that I end up talking to my dog rather than listening to
Mm,
books. Or I'm trying to solve a story problem or figure out how I'm going to write this paragraph or something like, I use it as a thinking time. I also use audiobooks to help me fall asleep on a red eye flight.
mm,
There's something about audio. I have to see the words in front of me. I'm not an auditory learner, I think, because
mm.
audiobooks put me to sleep. And it has nothing to do with the quality of the book. It could be the best book ever. I would still fall asleep. It's just that that calming listening feeling. It relaxes me and I fall asleep.
I
So
want
I'm
to
not
thank
big on audiobooks.
I want to thank you so much for being on the program today. For our listeners and watchers, please come check us out at bookfloodpodcast.com. And again, thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Tom. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.